We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Free Association Radio. This is the Friday FARcast, and I am Robert Phoenix, your host for the next 2 hours. And what a jam-packed, information-filled, and enlightening 2 hours we have in store for us. That's right. We have three excellent guests scheduled for today. Two are going to be live. One is a taped interview I did with Darren Williams earlier in the week, and that's a really interesting half-hour segment. I'm going to run that at the end of the show, so be sure to stick around. You don't want to miss it. Darren's always got some really interesting connections that he brings to the table. In the middle of the show, we're going to have Emily Moyer on, and some of you might know Emily as the co-host of Off Planet Radio with Randy Boggins. And Emily is a good friend, and she's also a pretty brilliant researcher. And one of the things that Emily turned me on to was the occult and esoteric world of pro tennis. Now, I know a little bit about tennis, but I don't know nearly as much as Emily does. So we're going to go down a very interesting rabbit hole and talk about the superstars of tennis and who they are and what drives them and what are the supernatural forces behind them. And then my first guest today is a dear old friend. We used to do a lot more stuff, back in the mid 2000s, around 2010, 2011, 2012, right around that era. Of course, I'm talking about Coach Khayr Love. And Khayr and I met essentially through Sister Myra. And Sister Myra was doing these kind of esoteric breakdowns of the Super Bowl. And my audience said, hey, you've got to get Sister Myra on. So I got Sister Myra on, and she said, you need to be friends with Khayr. So Khayr and I connected. We've had some great times together, online and offline, or at least off air. And he wanted to talk about Donald Trump. And he wanted to talk about, apparently Trump's charts, which I know intimately. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to take about a half an hour or so, and I'm going to get Khayr's take on Trump's chart and why he thinks Trump is a positive force. And I generally think this is the case here too, maybe for different reasons than Khayr. But I'm sure that between the two of us, we'll be able to piece together a pretty interesting and compelling case about why this is an important figure historically and contemporarily and leading into the future. So I'm not quite sure which one of these numbers as Khayr, but I'm going to try this one because we've got some people lined up in the queue today. So let's open the line, and behind door number 2, who do we have? Hello.
Hi, Robert.
No, it's not Khayr.
No, it isn't.
Who's this?
This is Gardner.
Who's this? Gardner.
Gardner.
Okay. I got to put you on. I got to put you on hold. It's good to hear your voice. I got to go find Khayr. Hold on.
Okay.
All right. That was the Gardner. Wow, I haven't heard her. Okay, here we go. How about right here? Hold on. Here we go.
What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Big time.
This is
What's
the Love
happening?
Doctor behind door number 3. What's going on, brother?
Team Taurus, Atlanta, Georgia, baby. What's happening? What's happening? I'm excited.
Hey, you bring some healing to that city after Sunday?
Here's the thing, man. Reputation. And Atlanta's an excellent setup. The Super Bowl is an excellent setup for leading into Donald Trump. If you know about reputations of people, then why be angry? So no one in Atlanta is angry because Atlanta has the reputation of letting people down, and New England has the reputation of doing whatever it takes to win, period. So, mine is more actual factual, and I think that when you deal with the truth and facts, that's where the healing starts. So, yes, people in Atlanta didn't even really think Atlanta could win. Trust me. They really, I'm here every day. The guy in the grocery store was wearing a New England Patriots hat. He was like, it'll never happen.
Oh, my God. Wow.
he was like 55 years old. He was like, I've been born and bred here. They'll never give us anything. This is what they do. They get us all pumped up, and then they let the air out. So, it was – and I'm not even a big Atlanta fan. I like watching the games, but I just look at the reputation. And Tom Brady, his nickname is Ice Water. He doesn't care, and Matt Ryan doesn't have a reputation of finishing the deal. And the Atlanta program doesn't have a reputation of finishing the deal. So, and we can get into the conspiracy theories and all of that stuff. But
yeah, Coach, I was going to ask you about that. A lot of people said the game is fixed, game is rigged. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, how did they rig that catch that Edelman caught where the ball almost touched the ground? How did they rig?
Thank you.
If they can rig that, and they can rig the 2 catches that number 11 did where his toes tippy-tap on the sideline for Atlanta, yeah.
Julio Jones, yeah.
They're good. If they can rig the Julio Jones catch, the 2 catches by Julio Jones and the 2 catches by Edelman, hey, that's amazing. I want to be on their team.
All right, so here's my theory, and we're going to get to Trump. So here's my theory. My theory is that the league wanted a close game. They hate blowouts because they want eyeballs on the TV. And I think that there were some moves that were made in the second quarter. I saw some stuff that didn't really smell right, and a few more things in the third quarter. But at the end of the day, that game was winnable for the Falcons. And
that game was,
you're right. You're exactly right about the catch. And by the way, Tom Brady's got to make those throws. If he doesn't make those throws, it doesn't matter.
He doesn't right. Who was throwing? Yeah, who was rigging those throws he was making? And who rigged the coach to call a shotgun play and then tell Matt Ryan, the MVP, to drop back 7 more steps and then give up a sack and take him out of field goal range?
I don't think Kyle Shanahan is on the take. If he is, then we're dealing with a worldwide conspiracy that is even worse than chemtrails and central banking. So, I think they wanted a close game. I've seen officiating get involved. I've seen it across all platforms of sports. The big money was on the Patriots. Vegas lost money with that game. They lost money. That's a fact. So if Vegas lost money, there would be no incentive from a kind of a mob perspective to throw that game. Also, there's a great deal of antipathy between Bob Kraft and Roger Goodell. And I don't think Roger Goodell really wanted to have that moment with the Patriots. And then and then we'll get into the Trump thing. Lastly, if you see Arthur Blank on the sideline, and he's just looking as grim can get, that guy, there's no way that guy is a co-participant in some sort of, grand scheme to give the Patriots the win. And if he wasn't, and there was, then he's going to the wrong synagogue. That's all I'll say.
My last remarks is this is what people can learn from the Super Bowl, and is exactly in talking about the owner. Never celebrate too early and play all the way to the end. Atlanta celebrated too early, including their owner. He had no business on the sidelines pretending he was Jerry Jones. And the owner for the Patriots, Bob Kraft, stayed in place, and he didn't count his money until the dealing was done.
That's right. Bob Kraft was in the box.
And Vegas didn't lose money because you can bet on quarters. You can bet on quarters. So Vegas never loses. So there was big money for the overall game, but remember, the addict who has the addiction starts to bet on quarters. And then you can make so many bets, like, are they going to make this third down? Are they going to score this drive? Are they going to
they got the prop bets.
They have all of those.
I'd like to see what the odds were on the prop bet for overtime.
Ooh.
And who made those bets? That's the data that I'd like to find out, because never before in Super Bowl history has there been an overtime game, and if somebody picked that and put some money down on that, that'd be an interesting rabbit hole. Hey, let's get to Trump. Of course, the Patriots win. Tom Brady, avid Trump supporter. Bill Belichick, avid Trump supporter. I'm sure Bob Kraft loves the Donald. So this was, for all intents and purposes, a win for Trump, and there were a lot of people out there on the left-hand side of the street that were really hoping that the Falcons would stick it to the Patriots, because the Falcons win would be a loss for Trump. And obviously it did not happen. It was one of the few wins that Trump's had over the past week, as he becomes now mired in the court system with the boondoggle of the travel ban, which I have mixed feelings about. But he certainly has been taking a bit of a beating publicly with the leaks that are coming out, and doing a kind of an about face now with China, which is par for the course. We'll see that in the charts. You and I got together on this, and you've come back onto the stage here on this show because you said, hey, I've got something I want to talk about with Trump. I think there's something positive going on here. And I said, great, let's bring you on. First thing first, first question before we get into the chart, I want to ask you, Khayr, is Donald Trump a racist?
No.
What would be the evidence? And I've asked people about this. What would be the evidence of him being a racist? I mean, show me anywhere of anything that he's done with his business. Now, he had a thing back in the 80s with his dad and rent, and we've gone over that. Shit happens. He paid fees. I think that was more of an economic and a business decision versus a racially motivated decision. Is it right? No, but this is America. People are doing business, and a lot of people do bad business, and a lot of times they don't get caught. Other than that, I have seen no evidence that Donald Trump is a racist, and yet they keep banging that drum. Why is that, Khayr?
Because of poverty consciousness. Poverty consciousness is what keeps racism alive. I am very brown-skinned. They call me African-American. They call me black. They call me Moorish American. They call me all these things. They call me a melanated. I have dreadlocks or locks. So I understand from the inside of what this poverty consciousness is. And the community remember, let's go to the planet Earth. The planet Earth is a place of suffering. So you have to make a choice individually that you don't want to participate in suffering anymore. It is not a requirement that you be sensitive down here for other people. You got a big echo going on in the background too, Robert. I don't know if somebody else.
Hold on a second. Let me take care of that. Hold on a second. All right, go ahead. Try that again, Khayr.
All right. So, excellent. So Donald Trump.
Can you hear me? Hold on a second.
Yes.
Are you there?
I'm here. I'm loud and clear.
Okay, hold on. Are you there now?
Mic check. I'm here.
Okay, I got you. All right, we're good.
All right. So Donald Trump is a businessman, but when you are in poverty consciousness, you concentrate on your consciousness. You concentrate on poverty. You concentrate on being the victim. And anytime someone comes along who is not playing on your basketball court, you're calling them names. You're saying this, that, and the third. But we forget so quickly the number one rule on the planet is only the strong survive. And when Donald Trump says we're going to make this country great again, the country needs to be strong. And Donald Trump, he's not very discerning. He's not very nurturing. He has Saturn in Cancer, which is what I want you to do as I'm explaining. I'm going to, so the people listening, I'm going to show Robert how we cosmopause certain things over at Cosmophysics. So I want you, Robert, and whoever's like the listening who's a pretty efficient astrologer, I want you to change his birth time to 5:18 a.m. I want you to change his birth time to 5:18 a.m. and put him in Washington, D.C. Now, I'm going to finish why he's not a racist, while you're changing that. And I want you to use whole house, use whole sign, no intersecting houses. I want you to use whole sign so we can be looking at the same chart. All right, now, Donald Trump's not a racist because he's a businessman. And when you only have a choice, he's the manager of this restaurant. America is a restaurant. It hires a manager every 4 years. Sometimes a manager gets 2 terms. Sometimes they only get 1 term. On the day that the inauguration day, January 20th, is a 7 of diamonds. 7 of diamonds is a millionaire card. Hillary Clinton has no reputation of making someone financially great. She's a wonderful politician. She knows how to be discreet. She knows how to lie. She knows how to say the right things, but she doesn't know how to make this money. Now, I'm going to ask you, what law passed the very same day Donald Trump was elected in November? What else really big was being voted on in the United States across America, Robert?
Got me. Roll it out.
The marijuana.
Oh, yes, Mr. Soros, yes.
You can say Mr. Soros or whatever, but guess what? Wherever the marijuana goes, the economy is going to rise and unemployment is going to drop, period. And in America, that's the statistic that everybody throws at every president. Did unemployment go up or down, and what is the Dow Jones doing? Well, when California went recreational and Vegas went recreational, what do you think is going to happen in Massachusetts? What do you think is going to happen across the rest of the country for the next 4 years? And now we have the momentum. We went with Seattle and Colorado. Now we've got California and Vegas and Massachusetts. Florida's coming. Georgia's coming. Washington, D.C.'s coming. It's all coming, baby. It's all coming. And Hillary Clinton could not manage that. She can't manage money like that's not her forte. That's not her forte. But he's going to be known, and he's not talking about it. And then what he is talking about is what direction people need to be leaning in this. What kind of country do we stay in? A capitalist society. Capitalist means what? We must capitalize. And because Donald is so, he just wears it all on his sleeve, he's telling people where the money is at. If you go back and watch Trading Places, you'll understand why Donald Trump is wonderful. Go back and watch Eddie Murphy's Trading Places, and they go and they tell Eddie the Dow and Wall Street is determined by press releases. Whatever the press release says, that's the influence. So everybody was waiting for what the Donald was going to say at his first press conference. Now, before I get to the press conference and what he said, because I'm about to tell everybody where the money is at. I just told you one avenue is going to be the marijuana. Okay, now, is it bad that a lot of black people who were in the marijuana game who have felonies now cannot participate? Hey, that's karma. Donald Trump didn't set that up by himself. He's not that intelligent, and he doesn't have that much power. All right, he's got somebody pulling his strings too. So don't put all that on Donald Trump. You shouldn't have got felonies. You shouldn't have got felonies. I got felonies, so I can't be like, oh, the white man is against all of us, and the judicial. This is where I totally disagree with Louis Farrakhan. I totally disagree with Louis Farrakhan about this whole ideology of the systematic racism. No, the person who's getting hit by the systematic racism accepts it in their consciousness. Systematic nothing can do nothing to my consciousness when I take control of me and I start on the journey of self-mastery. Once I go into what is self-discovery, Robert? When's my birthday? What time was I born? Where's my Venus? Where's my Pluto? Where's my North Node? Where's my Mercury? There is no system that can stop me once I understand and have mastered my own chart. So, but I can be manipulated. God bless you 16 times. There's a lot of sneezing over there. But I can be manipulated if I don't learn to master myself and I create a habit of blaming others and I keep playing the victim, which is where this whole Donald Trump thing is coming. And whoever's pulling his strings, that's what they're relying on. But they're giving him his reign to do whatever, to make mistakes, because they know he can't hurt anybody because he's going to pass the marijuana laws. If he can lift the federal sanction off of the marijuana, then he will be probably he'll be the second greatest president behind what Obama did. Because Obama I think
pursuant to that, it's not just cannabis, but if he can also deregulate hemp production, which goes hand in glove with this, I think, and I've been advocating this for a while. Over the last 6 years, I used to have John Trudell from the Hempstead Heart Project, and we talked, in great detail about the benefits of hemp and all the products that can be created from hemp and all the cottage industries that could come out of that product creation. So it's not just the cannabis piece, which obviously there's huge amounts of money in, but it's also the hemp production. So I agree with you, but I think it's a 1-2 punch, and I think he's got to do both.
He's got to do both. Now, I'm gonna skip to the press conference, and then I'm gonna jump right into his chart, and I'm gonna tell you why I told you this came.
One more thing before we get into the comments in the chart. You said something really interesting when we first got into this, and I asked you point blank if you thought he was racist, and you said no, and then you said that the attaching of the moniker of racism is due in part to a poverty consciousness, which I thought was a really interesting comment. I didn't want to just gloss over that because I wanted to go take that one step further. Because when you get into this kind of notion around racism and what's really been a big divide and conquer kind of strategy over the last 8 years, this is what I've seen and experienced. What we've seen is this underbelly and the rise of deep socialism, neat communism, and a lot of the energy behind Black Lives Matters, and the leaders come out of the American Communist movement. And there's a very interesting correlation between what you would term poverty consciousness and communism, because in communism, what you have is a redistribution of wealth. And there's a great deal of wealth at the top and not a lot of wealth distributed amongst the masses. Now, well, I guess what I'm trying to figure out here is there a link between racism, poverty consciousness, and communism? Can we bring all those three together at the same party?
No, not communism.
Okay.
Not communism, because communism is government controlled, and in America we stay in a society where the poor can become rich. In communism, the poor can't become rich, but here in America, right, the poor can become rich if they so desire. If they so desire. Wallace Wattles wrote The Science of Getting Rich. And then I forgot the other guy's name, Levington or Brewington, wrote Dollars Won't Mean, all prior to the crash of Wall Street in the 1930s. Those are the scripts for any person of any color. Go back and look at Bruce Lee's Definite Chief Aim. Bruce Lee was Napoleon Hill's #1 student, and when he came over here, he left a communist country, and he was still looked upon as a nigger in the United States, because in the 60s, if you came here from China, you were in the same boat as a black person, and they called you a nigger. They did use the word point blank, period. And Bruce Lee says, I'm going to make $10 million between 1970 and 1980, period. And he did it off his consciousness. He didn't let that construct his conscious mind. He said, I'm done with, because he came to a place where there were no government restrictions on who can rise. I'm sick and tired, especially as a black person, before I even get to me being a spiritual enlightened teacher and all the other stuff. I cannot stand black people wanting, I can't stand white people wanting wealth to be distributed somewhere. Shut the freak up. I don't curse anymore, so I can't say what I want to say. I know I can because this is your show. But I'm working on it now. You know, two years ago, you know what I would have said, but
yeah, no, you and I we're rowing in the same boat, man. I've curtailed my expletives as well.
So, but why? Here's my question to the person saying, "Oh, there's not an equal distribution of wealth going on in the United States." Well, why should I distribute to someone who's not working like I'm working? They're not working like I'm working. They have all the capabilities. I don't want to hear that. Get out of my face. Now,
right.
Yes, and now there is. Hold on. I do not believe that there's systemized racism, but there is white privilege. White privilege does exist. Can't help it. Can't do nothing about it. Well, then that's just like having Saturn conjunct your Venus and you having a problem with relationships. Deal with it. Oh, Robert, my relationships is so hard, and I got Venus and Saturn and Capricorn, and they conjunct one another. What can I do to make this woman love me? Well, Robert, what are you gonna tell him, Rob? Hey, bro, it's gonna be tough. You can't have every woman that you want.
Hey, listen, I got a really good point I want to bring up about Bruce Lee, because I know a little bit about Bruce Lee. I know you do too. Bruce Lee had to get over racial stereotypes when he came to the United States. That much is clear, even to the point where he came up with the idea for the TV show Kung Fu, and they gave it to David Carradine. That was supposed to be Bruce Lee's show. But the really interesting piece around Bruce Lee, at least for me, is that he said that he was going to teach, Kung Fu. He's going to teach Wing Chun to the non-Asian community. And he did this in Oakland, California, and the Sifus from Oakland and San Francisco were not happy about this. And they basically sent a guy over to Bruce Lee's dojo and they said, okay, if you beat him, you can teach. And Bruce Lee whooped this guy's ass. So not only did he have to go against the racial stereotypes that he was facing here in this country, but he had to go against his own culture. He had to be a maverick on both sides of that ledger sheet.
Yes, he did, but he chose his consciousness over his culture, and that's the greatness of Bruce Lee. Not Jeet Kune Do, not any of that. He put his conviction into his consciousness. Now, did it get him killed? Yes, because the Chinese don't play that. The Chinese don't play that. You know what I'm saying? They didn't put their conscience. They were like, we're going to stick with our consciousness too, and we told you that you're being disrespectful, and we'll kill you. And they did.
But I think Lee exhibits a risk-reward kind of quality in that situation, where it would have been easy for him to say, "Oh, you're right. I'm gonna keep this under lock and key because my culture says that this is the way it's supposed to be done. I'm not going to cross that line." And I think that there's a lesson in there for all of us, because that's where he got the greatest amount of impact, and he really spread the message of martial arts and consciousness. Let's get into this chart. Now you guys over Cosmophysics, you like to mess with the time. I know you guys like to rectify, and sometimes I think rectification is appropriate. Other times I'm not a fan unless it's called for. So I want to get into why you chose a different time. And relocating on Washington, D.C., I totally get that. So give your rationale for this, and then let's get into the chart.
What planet rules government, Robert?
What's that?
What planet rules government?
Saturn.
So we're going to read Donald Trump's chart with Saturn in his first house. That's
you said 5:18 p.m.?
5:18 p.m. puts him at 0 degrees Cancer in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I don't have it at that. I've got Scorpio on the ascendant, Saturn on the in the 8th house. But maybe I've done the relocation or something wrong. But let's go with your model. So you're relocating Saturn on the ascendant. Roll with that.
And the reason we put Saturn on the ascendant is because I want to look at Donald Trump as the government person. If I wanted to look at him as, if I wanted to look at how he does relationships, I put Venus on the first house. If I want to look at his relationship to his mother and how he treats women, I put Sag on the first house. If I wanted to look at how he worked out in the gym and his masculine energy, I'd put Leo on the first house because that's where Mars is at. So this isn't for like reading his sole purpose. This is strictly.
So you're looking at a functional application of how Saturn manifests in the first house.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Cool.
Because I'm about to offend some astrologers who are not as open-minded as you are. Astrology doesn't just tell us information due to the time of birth. We can adjust it how we want to. It's our tool. Tool. The planets are still going to give you the correct information. If I wanted to put Gemini on the first house, then I would tell you about his ego. If you want to know about Donald Trump's ego? Put Gemini on the first house. But we're talking about government. We're talking about government and why he's good for us. Why is he good for us? Because America is too dang emotional. And that's what he's saying. Get control of your emotions. We're going to put Saturn right here in your face. Get control of your emotions and start being more responsible. Pull up your bootstraps and don't give me any dad-blasted excuses. Donald Trump will not let you give him an excuse. And when people, because we have excused ourselves ever since Nixon. We have not. We just want everything to be fair. We want everything to be Libra. Oh, and we want to dissect it. Libra is an air sign. We want to just dissect it. We want justice. Oh, but government is what? Capricorn. It's Saturn, baby. It's Saturn. And you can't get around Saturn. And when you go with integrity, stop worrying about whether Donald Trump is moving in integrity. He's a puppet. He's a manager. That's why they put him there. Then you want to say, well, I want to look and say, well, everyone, I just did a reading this morning and I told a sister about her Lilith. Every person on earth has a Lilith in their chart. Every person has a Saturn in their chart. Every person has all aspects. And you can't escape it. And he's still living his chart no matter what. So when we look at Donald Trump's South Node, We find out why he's under everybody's skin, because he's still working on his own stuff. You don't get to like be president and say, "Oh, I don't have to work on my South Node anymore." My brother Robert Phoenix, you got to work on your South Node, baby. I got to work on my South Node. Everybody's got to work on your South Node, because guess what that is? That's the acorn in your shoe. That's the acorn in your shoe. That's the personal poison. And what is Donald Trump's South Node telling us about him? Self-righteousness.
His South Node's in Sagittarius.
Self-righteousness, aloofness, assuming others know whether...
It's conjunct his moon. Was he born on an eclipse, Khayr?
I'm not sure. I didn't even.
Yeah, I think
go that deep.
Trump is born on a lunar eclipse because he has the full moon in Sagittarius, South Node conjunct his Sagittarian moon. He's born on a lunar eclipse, so he's got this Saturn hanging out there right now. And yeah, and I look at this from the What's that?
I love you. No, because I was about to tell everybody why I love Robert Phoenix. But go ahead. I can still tell them later. I'm going to tell them, go ahead, finish.
Yeah, so how I see this is from just the Placidus unequal house chart. He's got all these issues going on right now about home, right? Home. Because that's the fourth house based on the natal chart. And then we've got transiting Saturn there, limiting access to home. Now, his home isn't just Trump Tower. His home is the United States. And so what I'm seeing here, and even with the depth, so check it out too, right? So he's living in a different place than Melania. So he's got limited access to the mother of his kid. And that's, so this is a very interesting time for him with Saturn on his South Node, in dealing with these immigration issues, Sagittarius, overseas. It's going to be, it's a very interesting kind of moment in time. We got an eclipse coming up this weekend, and it's not far off of, the lunar eclipse is not far off of his ascendant this weekend. What's your take on that?
Watch this. I got to go back into the point you just brought up. So you were looking at his natal chart. With the only because we're going through this issue around home, the big home, immigration, so his chart becomes the fourth house of the country, not just his own chart. But guess what? When we take him to Cancer rising, where do we move his moon to? We move his moon to the sixth house, which means transiting. So now the transiting Saturn is in his governmental sixth house. He came through and he's saying, this is the way I want things done. And he's putting these restrictions on the way people are, because people always look at the United States as service oriented. So we're supposed to serve all the immigrants. We're supposed to serve everybody. We're supposed to serve. But guess what? Trump has transiting Saturn going through his sixth house. So he's putting limitations. He's putting limitations on things. Okay, sure, it's not legal, and the Justice Department, that's why we have a system in place, which is why people shouldn't worry. He can't. What is he going to do? Fire those 3 judges who just said, "Hey, we're not going to honor this ban"? No, he's pissed because he's still a little kid. He's still a little kid by nature. He has Mercury in Cancer, so he can't follow the. He can't follow the, what's the thing that you look at that tells you what to say? He can't follow that.
The teleprompter.
He can't follow that. He can't follow the teleprompter. He's not President
Teleprompter. We already had that.
President. He is not, yes, we've already had plenty of those. We've had the cocaine teleprompter in Bush. Then we had the Denzel Washington knockoff teleprompter. And now we got, I can't teleprompt. I got to tell you how I feel, and I feel all about my money. Because now with Cancer at the ascendant, that puts Leo on his second house. That puts Pluto and Mars in his second house. I'm only here to do what I do, and all I do is get money. I'm not here to make you feel good. I'm not here to nurture you. I may only be here 4 years, and guess what? The people pulling my strings, in my opinion, are even setting y'all up for the supreme nurturer to come back. Miss Capricorn herself, Michelle Obama, right now is the #1 prime candidate to step in right now and shut everything down. She'll shut it all down. Like, there'll be no use of you even trying to run against Michelle Obama in 4 years if she wants to run. If she wants to run in 4 years, there's no way. Because Trump is going to have, of course, people coming out in droves to vote, which I don't really care about because the electoral vote told you that we're putting Trump in office. We don't care. We're not putting Hillary in office. But Michelle is such a great people person that she'll make the Republicans, let her in if that's what's going to happen. But right now, it's all about the money. And if you see that he's still struggling, everybody, please go get Astrology for the Soul by Jan Spiller, rest in peace, and just turn to Gemini North Node and then turn to the page that says tendencies to leave behind. If I could write a letter to Donald Trump and say, Donald, these are the tendencies that you should leave behind. I know what you're working on right now. He takes himself too seriously. He has a ponderous approach to life. He acts on intuition without checking the facts. He resists ideals that are foreign to his own belief system. He's espousing truth without taking others' views into account. Stop being mad at Donald Trump for living in his chart. I say the same thing to people who get into relationships with people, because that's my specialty. And I said I want to say something about Trump because the complaint is about the relationship that the American citizens are having, their romanticized relationship that they want to have with Trump. But Trump can only live through what he has in his chart, no matter what. He was a butthole to some before. He's still a butthole. You can't say you're not a butthole now because you're in office. He's just a butthole in office. But his South Node that he does not work on, he doesn't work on that. He got him where he's at. He thinks it's cool. Melania's terrified of him. Nobody wants to deal with him but Putin, because Putin has a team of astrologers who's like, sure, we'll manipulate him if he doesn't pay attention, no problem. And he's not working on this. I tell people who get in relationships and they say, oh, my partner cheated on me. I say, where's their Venus? Is there Venus in Gemini? Is there Venus in Libra? Is there Venus in Pisces? That person has a tough time being faithful. Oh, this person is stalking me. They won't get away. Is there Venus in Scorpio maybe? It is. Well, then you shouldn't have, if you don't want anybody stalking you, oh, this person won't commit to me, Robert. Is there Venus in Aquarius? Oh, so we're still not looking, we're still as a country are so blind to the remedies that astrology brings us when we pay attention. This is why I love Robert Phoenix, because he says, you know what, I'm not going to look at just public opinion, or I'm going to let public opinion influence me to go look at the chart. But will the public listen when we come back with actual numbers? If the doctor says your blood pressure is high, why are you going to argue with that? You get on the scale, you're 5'6", you weigh 300 pounds, and he says you're obese. And you say, oh, doctor, you're just
there are people now, Khayr, who will say, hey, it has nothing to do with me and my physical my physical form. Just fix me. I mean, that's kind of a new modern kind of remedy that certain parts of the community are now, kind of taking on. No, it has nothing to do with how fat I am. Just give me the right drugs, damn it. Do your job. Don't tell me I'm fat.
Donald Trump, don't tell me I'm broke and that I need more money. No, I want you to appease me, Donald Trump, like Obama did. I'm almost asleep right now. Why are you rocking my boat? Listen,
yeah.
Are you really serious? The day there was a march, I think it was the day after the ban. It was like 2 weekends ago or whatever. I had to go pick up a friend of mine coming in from the UK to, we were doing a workshop. You know what we were doing a workshop on? Healing, holistic meditation, breathing, juicing, nutrition, mineral content. And these people, instead of coming to my workshop, they were at the thousands at Hartfield International Airport with their signs protesting what Donald Trump's South Node. That's what I'm saying. They're protesting.
Yeah, well, that's also
South
Saturn, right? Saturn on his moon in Sagittarius law, and Saturn is the judges, right? The application and the dispensation of law. He's dealing with that right now.
And which is why we don't have to worry, because, Donald, if your emotions get too far, we have some judges that'll bring you right on back in.
He's about ready to bring Elliot Abrams on into the team in the cabinet, who's a dyed-in-the-wool neocon. He's surrounded himself with these bloodthirsty neocons, which I'm not crazy about. Hey, Khayr, we got a few minutes left here. Here's what I want. Here's what I want to do. First of all, before we say goodbye today, tell people where they can find you.
Man, listen. In order, you can find me on Instagram, Coach Khayr, Khayr. CoachKhayr.com is the website. But if you really want to make a difference in this world and harmonize what's going on with Donald Trump, learn astrology. I created a course called Keep It Simple Astrology Course.info. Keep It Simple Astrology Course.info teaches you the basics, teaches you my style, makes it easily understandable, it's not over your head. And then if you want to work on your definite chief aim, your definite purpose, I have a course called SelfMasteryTantra.com, because I'm still into healing the world through integrity and through going down into the heart center, healing the crown. And that's what Tantra is really about, liberation. SelfMasteryTantra.com is like my baby right now. I just launched it back in October. It's community based. It's just wonderful. I have a video on the page explaining it all. Please check out selfmasterytantra.com. Keep it simple astrology course.info. Of course, I'm on Facebook and all that, but I want to share. I want to serve. I'm living out of my Pisces North Node. You know, I know that when I let go and let God, and I give other people that perspective, then they have more time to really get to know the inner God in themselves. We all have an inner creator that's trying to come out and help us be more successful, receive more blessings in life. You know, stop whining and complaining about these external things that you have no control over, and start working on your own self-mastery, like Bruce Lee did, like Robert Phoenix is doing, like Coach Khayr is doing, like a lot of our friends are doing. That's really my message. I really appreciate it, Robert. Thank you. And when you said about the people that Donald has surrounded him by, I got to ride this real quick. I want to ask you, Robert, what about people who are impoverished, but they're entrepreneurs, and if they followed the entrepreneurial model that the American public is really not even letting Donald set all the way up. These aren't just, they may be corporate heads, but they're all entrepreneurs. And if you put that together with the Jobs Act that President Obama left behind, okay, Trump, you may have suspended the health care, but you didn't touch the Jobs Act. Why didn't he touch the Jobs Act? I want everyone to look up the Jobs Act and put that together with the entrepreneurial model that Donald Trump is putting together and how that will benefit society, because economics, Rob, ain't no romance without finance.
Yeah, hey, I don't have a problem with, his pumping up the economy and getting people stimulated and hungry and wanting to be entrepreneurial and giving them the economic tools to do that, if it's reducing taxes and I'll even cast a bit of a blind eye, to some of the oil stuff. I'm not a huge fan of fracking, but I know that, we've got to be able to produce something on a national level. If it's temporary, I'm not a fan of it, but we've got to rev the engine back up. I don't have a problem with any of that. My issue with people inside the cabinets is that a number of them are dual citizens, and a number of them have an allegiance to another country, and they have their own agenda, and they have their own wars that they want to fight, and they want us to fight those wars for them. And I'm not a fan. So if Trump can somehow divest that part of his Gemini consciousness and work on what's happening domestically and get people turned on again about all the good things about what it is theoretically to be American, hallelujah. I'll praise that. The other stuff, we've been involved in these proxy wars since 9/11, and we're tired of them. Our men, our women come home, they're wrecked. They've been shot up with these experimental vaccines. They're demoralized. We got a suicide rate of up to 22 a day coming home from these wars. Quite frankly, I think we're tired. And if Trump, he ran on this platform and he said that he was going to get us out of the mess in the Middle East that the two presidents prior to him got us involved with. And so far, he hasn't done it. And in fact, he's taken up and he's starting to bang the war drum with Iran. That part I'm not crazy about. The other part, domestically, pumping up the economy, bring it on. We need it. Khayr, it's been a privilege to have you on. Thank you, my friend, for joining us today.
Absolutely, my brother. It is an honor and a privilege. You're my A1 from day one. Thank you for what you do for the community in just your own household, properly running your own government, and the care that you take with everyone to make sure that they get the facts and how you show it from your, Dr. Gibson calls it, your aperture of consciousness. And I'm so proud to call you a friend of mine for someone who has such a wide view and such a wide aperture of consciousness. I really bow to you today, humbly, and thank you.
Right on. Well, just a cosmic mirror. That's Khayr Carter, also known as Khayr Love, also known as Coach Khayr. Go find him. He's a big resource. Thanks again, Khayr.
No problem.
There we go. That was 45 minutes of some really interesting stuff. And, he's right. You can get in there and you can put planets on the ascendant, and he's absolutely right. You can use astrology as a modular tool to be able to figure out, where's the business acumen going to show up? It's going to be Jupiter. Where's the spirituality going to manifest? We're going to put Neptune on the ascendant. It's a really interesting and very functional way of being able to have a modular relationship with the chart and astrology. And so he's a great guy too. I love Khayr. It's been too long for me to have him on the show. Let me play a little bit of music here. I'm going to find some scorching jazz with Michael Hill, and I'm going to track down Emily. I got a bunch of people in the phone queue. I should have Khayr on once a month, man. My phone lines are never lit up this much. So let's do a little testing 1, 2, 3 with Michael Hill. And I'm going to find Emily, and we're going to get into the esoteric world of all things, tennis. It should be absolutely fascinating. Here we go. Testing 1, 2, 3. That was testing 1, 2, 3 with Michael Hill. You're back with me, Robert Phoenix. This is the Friday FARcast. And that was a great first segment with Khayr. So good having him back on the show. My next guest, Emily Moyer, I met as a client and had some very interesting readings with her. And then Emily popped into Austin one day, and we spent the afternoon together covering some incredibly interesting territory. Since that day, Emily transitioned into a co-host position with Randy Moggins on Off-Planet Radio. And Emily and Randy have interviewed me a couple times, so I thought it'd be nice to have Emily. Maybe we'll get Randy on here one of these days and find out more about Randy. Randy's an interesting character, too. But I wanted to talk about this whole kind of world of occult and esoteric tennis, which I think is fascinating, especially when Emily broke it down for me. So what I want to do here is bring her on. I just don't know which one is Emily. We've got about 4 people in the queue. I'm just going to pick this one right here and see if this is Emily. Hello there.
Hi, Robert.
Did I get it right?
You got it right. Good guess.
All right. I'll give myself a prize.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me on. As you know, you're one of my favorite people in the independent media space, and it's a great honor to be here. So,
well, hey, my pleasure. And I just wanted to tap into your really interesting kind of mind share and background in tennis and this whole kind of weird world of symbolism and esoteric tennis. But before we do that, just give people a little bit of a brief history about who you are, especially as being a competitive gymnast and being around athletics most of your life.
Sure. So I was involved in gymnastics from the time I was 2 till I was about 20 as competing. I competed in NCAA Division I gymnastics. It wasn't like amazing like anything you'd see in the Olympics, but I was okay, and I have had some interesting experiences there. And then I continued on as a coach and did some stunt doubling work for years after that. And, you know, as I transitioned out of gymnastics, life got really weird for me. And, you know, through researching things going on in the world and through coming to understand more about my own personal experience, it sort of brought together knowledge of conspiracy, mind control, esoterics with my understanding and passion for athletics. I was a gymnast. That's the only sport that I'm really good at. But I've always liked tennis, and particularly I'd say for the last 15 or 20 years, I've paid very close attention to it. I watch way more tennis than I do gymnastics generally. And I began to notice, you know, at first I was just a fan. I liked it. I didn't understand why I liked it. I'm terrible at it. I mean, really like the worst ever. But as I've gotten to know more about the sport and about these other topics we'll be discussing, I understand why it appeals to me. And I began to notice that there was a lot of esoteric and occult kind of knowledge and symbolism and just sort of essence and effect being mirrored amongst the top 10, you know, with the top tennis players. That seems to reflect what was going on in the world, but maybe not in a super obvious way, but actually in a very meaningful, maybe more meaningful way than some of the obvious things. And you can find these effects in the symbols on some of the clothing they wear, in their names, in what they represent in terms of the country they're from and what that country means on a larger chessboard of, you know, the world stage. And it's been actually really, really fascinating. The characters at the top of tennis are extremely interesting. And a lot of this actually has become noticeable to more people just recently. The Australian Open just happened. There's a lot of stuff that happened there that we can get into. But let's just start with the very basic thing of if you look at the symbol or the logo for the Australian Open this year, it is very interesting. It looks almost exactly like the logo for the television program, the OA. And supposedly the OA...
I know, you know what? I noticed that.
Yeah. Yeah, and supposedly the OA means the original angel, but those of us who, you know, research and are, you know, are aware of the world of mind control, we understand that to mean Omega Alpha. And those are different kinds of programming that I recommend people research. And so when I saw the Australian Open, here we have it in reverse. So it looks exactly the same, except for instead of being side by side, it's the A on top of the O. And so it's Alpha Omega. Okay, so that when you open the Australian Open app on your phone, what you get is a tennis court that then turns into a pyramid and then into an Alpha Omega and drops a ball, an alpha sign, and drops the ball down. So a tennis court and a tennis ball turns into a pyramid and then an alpha and an omega. So to me, that was the first clue that we are in for a wild treat of esoteric symbolism for the whole 2 weeks. And sure enough, there was one night I was sitting, it was fairly early in the tournament, maybe the second or third round, watching a Nadal match, and between every single play, when they would do like the slow motion replay, they would put that AO up, and they would shine a light through it at a very interesting angle. I was having trouble. I was having to turn away when they were doing that. Like, I was finding myself almost becoming like triggered in some way by it. So I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So there's that. So what's going on with that, right? And then you look at, okay, so the kind of keeping in line, I want to go into a few things, but keep sort of in line with the theme of your show and of your last guest, who was excellent, by the way. I enjoyed listening. So what we have going on here, the overall summary of the Australian Open is the more things change, the more things stay the same. Or for those who dabble in the conspiracy or the metaphysical world, maybe we've been set back onto the appropriate timeline after deviating into something weird for a while. So all of a sudden, here in 2017, we have in the finals of the Australian Open Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal and Venus and Serena Williams. Is this 1999? Is this 2001? That's kind of crazy, right? Like, all these things have happened in between. For the last several years, while Serena has remained at the top of women's tennis, Venus hasn't, and I'll go into that later. That's actually going to be the focus of most of what I want to talk about. But over on the men's, Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal absolutely dominated the sport, dominated it for about 8 years. And then the last couple of years, they've been struggling with injuries and inconsistent performances, and the sport has become mostly dominated by Novak Djokovic and Andy Murray. And in previous shows that Robert and I have done together, I believe we talked a little bit about Andy Murray, or maybe that was a different show I did with someone else. But that's an interesting topic, too. I suggest
now, you and I talked about Andy Murray and Dunblade and that whole thing.
Yes, look, Andy Murray has a very fascinating background. So the two of them have been dominating for the last 2 years, with also the emergence of another player named Stan Wawrinka, who is Swiss as well as Federer Swiss. So suddenly we're back to, okay, the tennis world really loves, even though Andy and Novak have been on top the last 2 years, the tennis world really prefers most of the fans love Federer and Nadal. There's nothing they want more than a Federer and Nadal final. That's like the thing, that's like the cherry on top of everything for most tennis fans. And there is something energetically really much more exciting about when the two of them play. And, Roger Federer is Swiss. And the way I understand things, my esoteric understanding of the world is, the U.S. is the military power of the world. The Vatican or Italy is the religious sort of power of the world. London, which is where Andy Murray is from, is the banking power of the world. But people forget about Switzerland. Switzerland controls time. And one of the things Roger Federer is so good at is taking time away from his opponent. When you look at him, he's kind of like otherworldly. He sort of floats in, has a very Peter Pan-like essence, doesn't seem to be affected by reality and time the same way that everyone else is. Other than as he's gotten older, things have been more difficult for him. But this performance was very interesting. This was really a return to, his original kind of, how we saw him. And then Rafael Nadal has always been interesting. This is like a guy who muscles his way through tournaments. He wears his opponents out. That's how he wins. So I always look at it as Federer representing sort of the control system, who just kind of is on top of everything and seems to have, awareness and knowledge that others don't, and is able to sort of do his thing. I'm not saying he's a bad person or anything like that, but, he seems to have that energy about him. And with Nadal, it was always more of a struggle, more of a fight, more of a grind. 5 and 6 hour matches are not uncommon for him. And so I always saw him as sort of representing the little guy who has to work really hard to overturn that system of domination and control. And Nadal didn't win this time, but he's been down and out for a long time, and he's back in the game. So I see that as a positive thing. Of course, Roger Federer is Swiss, and there's two things about Switzerland. Yes, they have Swiss bank accounts and they control time. That's where the Large Hadron Collider is. That's where most watches are made. And let you guys in on a little hint. The other way that we're being really controlled, besides through the financial system, is through our misunderstanding of time and our obsession with time and thinking of it as a linear thing. So that's what he kind of symbolizes to me. Okay, so that was interesting. And then with the women, Serena's been very dominant for a long time, a really long time. I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like her in the world of sports, particularly women's sports. A lot of people consider her to be the greatest female athlete of all times and some of the greatest athlete of all times, period. So no surprise she is where she is. The big surprise here was Venus Williams. And let me give you guys a little background because she's a lot less talked about in the media than her sister, and so not as well known. She's a few years older. Venus Williams is 37 years old, and she has been at the top of women's tennis, back in the from the late 90s through until sort of the late 2008, 9, 10, and then she sort of fell back, and she had Sjogren's syndrome, which is an autoimmune disease that affects the body's ability to produce liquid, like tears and sweat and whatnot. And she struggled for a really long time, and people did not think she was ever going to really make it back to the top of tennis. The last year or two, she's been playing better, but has not come anywhere close to what she did here. I don't think she dropped a set on her way to the final. And the other interesting thing about Venus Williams, and I've always paid attention to this, is she is the only one of the top tennis players that is not represented by a major clothing company. She does not wear anyone else's sigil on her body while she performs. She has her own clothing line, and it's called 11. So yes, sure, there's esoteric and occult symbol, significance there as well, but it is her own. And I find that to mean something significant. What, I'm not exactly sure, but I've always paid attention to that. And so here she is. She's back. She's 37. No one expected her to be there, and she didn't win. But just like Nadal, she's back in the fight. And I really want to. I did some research since I knew I was coming on into the occult aspects and meaning of Venus, and I'm going to share some of what I found with you guys. So Venus is Aphrodite, and she is the goddess of love and beauty and the one who emerges. Most of the time, she was depicted as an innocent virgin, which is also interesting because I've never heard her talked about in terms of in a relationship with anybody else. Like, we always hear about Serena's going to get married to the head of Reddit. We always heard she used to be with Common. She's been with several famous people. We hear about that all the time. You never hear about that with Venus. So anyway, most of the time she was depicted as an innocent virgin with an incorruptible ethereal body who exerts her great powers over human beings, as well as plants and animals, maintaining and sustaining life. Most often portrayed in beautiful, alluring clothes, woven especially for her by the Graces. So that's interesting considering her issue with her clothing line. She is also mentioned as a goddess of light and the shining star in heaven. Her most popular portrayal is as the goddess of love, fertility, beauty, and regeneration, who calms seas and pacifies nature, meaning that her qualities balance and harmonize humans' instincts and emotions. As an archetype of beauty, she always wore a beautiful wreath. And if you look at Venus Williams, the way she wears her hair a lot of the times, it's like in a braid that almost looks like a wreath. So I found that to be really interesting. She is the pure essence of beauty and love that redeems the dark matter of unconsciousness and ignorance. She represents the divine power within her celestial virgin nature that attracts and guides human consciousness from within back to its source. So I find that really fascinating when you think about where we are right now, politically, socially. And the other thing I want to say is during the weeks of the Australian Open, the planet Venus was shining brighter than it had in hundreds of years, and she makes it to the final. And so she didn't win. So her emergence doesn't necessarily represent that, human consciousness has won yet, but it's back in the game. And I think that goes along with a lot of this discussion of Donald Trump, imperfect as he is, may represent us moving on to a better timeline or resetting something that we had been, taken astray from. What do you think, Robert?
Right. Hey, wasn't there like a some kind of an event down in Australia around the time of the Australian Open. A lot of people said it was a false flag. Didn't something happen right around then?
I'm not sure. I haven't heard that.
Yeah,
That's very interesting.
something happened. It was it was like a terror event, and they went after this guy. But if you really look into it, you can tell it's just another false flag. But it was happening sort of simultaneously around the Australian Open. So we've got Venus, the morning star, and Aphrodite, but we have Serena. And Serena means serene. I mean, that's what her name means. But what's interesting about Serena, Serena was a saint, and she was canonized or martyred in 1914, but she's been dropped from modern martyrologies due to the questionable nature of the source documents. So Serena, as a saint, has been removed from sainthood.
Well, that's fascinating. I didn't know that. That's fascinating. Serena's an interesting character, and I figured we'd kind of go there. I'd see where you led with that.
Is she a guy? Is Serena a guy?
Okay, so I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and so for a long time I thought maybe she was, and what I've come to understand and believe at this point now, I'm going to have a guest on our show in a few weeks that's going to talk about a little bit of this with me. I think that she's intersex. I think that there are several athletes that are intersex. I actually think that there is some kind of intersex athletic program, and that Bruce Jenner is a part of it. If you think about the advantages of having certain characteristics male and certain characteristics female for certain sports, it's undeniable. And when you look at her, I mean, there's certain aspects of her that are feminine looking and some that are like super masculine looking. And then there's always this thing where, she could probably play on the men's tour. She probably wouldn't win, but she'd probably be in the top 50 or 70 players. And she serves bigger than a lot of the men. So does her sister, but her sister is a different thing. Her sister actually, has a faster serve recorded than Serena, but is not as good of a server. It's an interesting, I've spent a lot of time on this one. But the thing about Serena, and actually both of them for me, but let's focus more on Serena because she has much more of a media presence, there's nothing serene about her. The only thing that's actually serene about her is how confident she is with her own ability. And when she's in her zone, it is like when she's in the zone, there's no question she's going to win. So that can be kind of, a type of serenity, I suppose. But she is a vector of chaos. When the Williams sisters showed up on the tennis tour, they shook things up. It was like these two sisters showed up and just sort of took over. And there was a lot of people who didn't necessarily like that. And, they went about dealing with the rest of the tennis world in a different manner than most people do. And they didn't necessarily make tons of friends, but I think over time, people came to have respect for, obviously, their athletic ability. And once they got to know them, they understood more about them, where they come from. They come from Compton, and I think and understand, people became to appreciate them. And then there was this thing that happened several years back at Indian Wells tennis tournament where Venus and Serena were supposed to play, I think, in the semifinal, and Venus pulled out. And I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was Venus that pulled out. And so people felt like it was their father pulling her out so that they wouldn't have to play, or because he wanted Serena to win, or it was some weird thing like that. And it ended up that they ended up getting booed really badly by the crowd. And for some reason, they took this, and some people who like to agitate this way took this as a racial thing, where the way I see it is people wanted to see a tennis match, and when you have two sisters playing against each other and you pull one out, there's a question mark there, right? And so for many years, they did not go back to the Indian Wells tennis tournament. And when they finally, a few years ago, Serena went back, and last year Venus went back. But when Serena first went back, there was so much talk about it in the tennis media world, and they were talking. It was like the same time that like all the racial like things started happening with the police, and it felt like an extension into the sports world of that for me. You had like Billie Jean King commenting on it, talking about all this racism, you know what I mean? And Billie Jean King has become a total cultural Marxist, and I don't appreciate that. She's, you know, she had her great accomplishments, and she represented a lot of forward movement for women and for gay people in sports, but now she's doing this thing where she's part of the regressive left that basically, you know, bludgeons everybody who doesn't want to accept everything all the time anyway that you know, it's being delivered to them. And I don't appreciate that. And Venus and Serena have been two of the biggest stars in all of sports for many, many years. People absolutely love them. They are not suffering from being, you know, any kind of racism at all.
Right.
And so to make an issue like that, I saw it as really an issue about sportsmanship, you know, and really having more to do with their father than them, because they were both very young at that point. So, but, you know, so that's interesting. And then you have Serena in the Beyonce video overturning cars and rioting and protesting and, you know, things like that. There's definitely nothing really serene about what she represents.
Right.
And, you know, the other thing is, from what I understand, the name also means moon, related to the moon. And as we all understand, the moon is a vector of a tremendous amount of upheaval and chaos for us. And so that doesn't surprise me. I remember something interesting I heard one time, and it was funny. I think it was like, maybe you were on the Clyde Lewis show one time, and this was either during the same show you were on or the one like the day before or the day after, and it happened to be the same week I was going out to the tennis tournament in Indian Wells. And he was reading some story about some like esoteric or kind of story, ancient story about people traveling to the desert to worship Venus and Serena. And it was on the same year that Serena was making her return to finally play there. And I thought, wow, that's super fascinating. You know, I'm driving there and listening to that. I was listening to the podcast in the car. I'm like, that's really interesting. So that's kind of my feeling about Serena. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, Serena physically looks like a man. I mean, she's just built in a way that is, you know, really masculine, but her face looks very feminine. What's interesting about both the Williams girls is that none of them have children. Isn't that right?
Yep. None of them have children, and the other thing, and I just forgot this, is they both, along with the gymnast Simone Biles, who will also be discussed on an upcoming episode of my show, were all tested positive for banned substances during the Olympics, but they have passes. And I'm curious to know what that substance is for the Williams sisters. And there's a large part of me that has the instinct that it might be something that is designed to control testosterone. Because if you test too high with testosterone, then you can't compete as a female. Yeah.
Right. The other thing that's strange about the Williams sisters is that one of their sisters got murdered.
Yes.
Right? Yetunde Price.
Yes.
That's very strange, don't you think? I mean, when you get into this whole world around like ritual sacrifice and stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you look at most of the major famous sports stars, particularly the African-American ones, most of them have lost someone, usually to some very strange kind of murder or a very strange accident. And there is the whole concept, and I think there's validity to it, that to attain the level of status that they have, it's something that has to be allowed or something that's created, not something that just occurs naturally. You have to sacrifice someone to the dark forces, basically. And so if you look at that with the musicians, with the athletes.
Yeah, we're not saying that actually happened. However,
right,
it is a little odd, given kind of the climate that we live in.
The other thing interesting about them is they're Jehovah's Witnesses, and I never hear Venus talk about it, but Serena always thanks her god Jehovah when she wins a tournament. And it's, a lot of the famous black musicians are Jehovah's Witness. Prince, Michael Jackson.
That's right, yep.
It was just funny because none of these people are people who I would consider to behave in a way typically the Jehovah's Witness that you meet in the regular world behaves. And then also a lot of like the rap stars like Jay-Z or whatever, they reference Jehovah a lot. In fact, I think that's one of Jay-Z's nicknames.
Yeah,
so
Jehovah. Jehovah.
I think there's like a different sect of Jehovah's Witness that maybe they're part of and referring to that is part of sort of the dark occult aspect of the music and celebrity industries.
Jehovah's Witnesses were started by Charles Taze Russell, who comes out of Freemasonry. So it's another controlled cult.
It's a cult. It's just like Scientology or the Mormonism or whatever. It's a controlled cult. I think that they use these cults to experiment with specific kinds of mind control and ritual abuse and whatever to see what the effects are in a more enclosed kind of community. And then certain ones that work, they take them out and use them everywhere else.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Anna Kournikova for a little bit. She got suspended, and I always thought that the timing of Kournikova's suspension was interesting, given that we were going to go into this really cold phase with Russia. Did you think that was kind of suspicious?
So, yeah, I'm totally glad you brought this up. And I think you're talking about Maria Sharapova, not Anna Kournikova.
Maria Sharapova, my bad.
Anna Kournikova was another Russian tennis player who was a big celebrity, but wasn't a great
she
tennis
looked great,
player.
but she couldn't play tennis all that well.
Yeah. So Maria Sharapova, I'm so glad you brought this up. Yeah, I think you're dead. I think they will mirror out in sports what is going on in the geopolitical world, because people are first of all, people who don't care about geopolitics care about sports. And so it's a way of pushing that same energy into the mass populace who don't pay attention to what's going on geopolitically, or who, if they do pay attention, don't really understand it. And so it's part of the whole anti-Russian thing that started with her. She was the first one, and then continued on through the Olympics. And it basically circled around this drug called meldonium that Maria Sharapova, that had been legal, and it was just banned at the end of last year. And somehow she didn't get the memo, and she tested positive for it at the Australian Open. And the meldonium is interesting. So from what I've been able to understand about researching it, it is something that basically allows quicker uptake of oxygen, and that I find interesting because when I was doing gymnastics, I had a Russian coach at one point who told me that, and this was back when the Russians were better than everybody in gymnastics. She told me that the reason the Russians were so good and could do really difficult tumbling passes at the end of their routine, the kind of passes that most people did at the beginning, was because they took something called oxygen cocktail. So I'm going to go ahead and make the flying leap that we're talking about the same thing, because a lot of Russian athletes were on this meldonium. Some of them were suspended from the Olympics. Some of them weren't. It seems selective, but nobody has received as harsh of a penalty as Maria Sharapova. She received a huge fine and, a huge suspension that was reduced. She'll be back in time for the French Open, but she's been out for a year and a half now.
Yep.
Yeah, a year and a half. And obviously, that was going to be her last attempt. She's been to the Olympics before, but she's probably not going to be around in 4 more years for another. So they took that away from her. In my opinion, you need to be responsible when you're a professional athlete for knowing what the rules are, and it was her mistake that she didn't. And so a fine and a short suspension, in my opinion, was merited. But this is ridiculous. And it's kind of like ongoing sanctions with countries that we don't like.
Right. It's like what they did with the Russian athletes down in Brazil.
It's exactly that. This was the thing with Maria Sharapova was the first thing that brought that onto the radar. And so then when that's happening there, the Americans are getting the idea, all Russians are like that. All Russians are like Vladimir Putin. We don't like Vladimir Putin. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same. Like, Maria Sharapova is, in some ways, the Vladimir Putin of the athletic world now. You know what I mean? Like, she's a symbol for that.
Right. Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. Over the course of her career, she's avoided the kinds of bad behavior and controversy that a lot of celebrity athletes have. She's been a fairly good role model. It was her mistake. She fessed up to it right away and pretty openly. And, it's something, there isn't this malintent when something that she's been taking for her entire career, she gets tested positive for it 3 weeks after it's been banned. You can't say that this was some grand conspiracy of hers to cheat, right? Maybe it is cheating, but then it should have been banned a long time ago. So to make it like she was knowingly doing something at that period of time to have a leg up, I don't know. It seems unfair. You know what I mean? And they really focused it in on her. She paid a very heavy price, and I think it's wrong. But yeah, it's definitely like that. Really, that happened actually before the big bad Russian boogeyman stuff started. In terms of the politics, it was right before it. So you had everybody
it presaged this kind of new Cold War with Russia. It was almost like she was kind of a sacrifice, sacrificing their goddess, and really the peak of her athletic career for what was now becomes a new Cold War. I have two questions. We have to kind of wrap this up here, because I want to play Darren's interview. First question is, there's occult symbolism across all these sports. Baseball is clearly a Freemasonic template. If you break down everything around baseball, from the field to how they situate, the diamond always pointing towards Sirius. Hold on, I'm about to sneeze. Excuse me. All the Major League Baseball fields, they all point northeast. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me. Everything about baseball, similar to tennis, represents sacred geometry, which is really important in this esoteric stuff, the direction things point, the angles on the field. What do they call that thing? Even that little ritual they all do every time there's a play, they throw the ball around, they call it like around the horn, or what do they call it?
Yeah, that's right.
To me, that's like a little ritual happening between each play.
Yeah, well, it's after a strikeout, for sure. Not each play, but after a strikeout. Yeah. So, but when you get into, I would say that the last 10 years have really been about the Illuminati inside of basketball. And that's where you saw, Kim Kardashian sort of make her kind of entrance, into the world of pro basketball. She dated, she married a guy from the New Jersey Nets, and he was lucky to get out of there with his life. Her sister married Lamar. Her sister married Lamar Odom, and Odom legally died. I'm not even sure if he's Lamar Odom anymore. But you got to see through LeBron James and all these other guys in the NBA that the Illuminati symbolism became very, very popular. Jay-Z became a minority owner of New Jersey Nets. Okay, we got that. And then trickled over into football to a large extent. But what about tennis? I mean, these are kind of American sports. Basketball is urban. Football is kind of, militaristic with a little bit of an urban edge. But tennis is the sport of royalty and the elite.
Sure.
What are they communicating on an esoteric level in these matches and all of the kind of arcane symbolism associated with it?
So it certainly dates back to to Britain and royalty, and the way the game is scored with the love 15, 30, 40. It doesn't really make sense mathematically, but I always wondered why they called having nothing love, because I always felt like nobody loves having nothing. But I did some research and found out it's because when you love something, you do it for nothing. So I thought that was interesting. But the way I see tennis is as the age-old battle of wills. And if you think about it, like back before we had media and the kind of governments we had now, the way power was displayed and what would happen is two people who were battling for a spot would have like a sword fight or a duel, and the one who won would be like in charge, or that, or would be king, or would be the head of the tribe or the group or whatever. And so I see, especially when you get into these really long epic battles like you see between Federer and Nadal or whatever, I see it as like those kinds of old like sword fights for power. So I think So I think that what we're seeing when we see these battles on the table, so it's interesting. You see Switzerland, and generally the most common finals we've had have been between those four people in some fashion: Nadal, Federer, Andy Murray, and Novak Djokovic. Novak Djokovic is Serbian. He ends up in this situation most often with Andy Murray. So Serbia is one of these countries that was taken over, broken up and taken over, and that's the British Empire there. Even though it's being acted through American military and NATO, These ideas come from British and Anglo-American power. And so, in some ways, Novak Djokovic breaking through that was really interesting because these were one of these countries that was broken up and just harvested for resources and organs and sex trafficking and all of this kind of stuff. But here he's emerged as a really dominant force in tennis. Andy Murray represents everything. There's a lot of likable things about Andy Murray. He represents that old guard. He's a Scottish guy, even though, that's part of Britain. But he's such a weird case. As we said earlier, he was in that preschool in Dunblane. If you look into the specifics of the Dunblane preschool shooting, God, there's a lot of things there that mimic Sandy Hook, and it led to gun confiscation in the UK. He was there, and then he rises, and he's a tennis star, and he has some people disagree with me on this, but you and I have discussed this. He has a striking resemblance to Prince Charles, and to William. He is when he won his first major, which was the U.S. Open, he went and bought the hotel in Scotland where the Knights Templar was formed. And when he got married, he was in that kind of regalia that they used to wear. And then when he just won Wimbledon for the second time, I think he got like some kind of award, an OBE or something, when he won Wimbledon the first time. But he just won Wimbledon again last summer, and he was knighted. And so, he's part of that whole royalty, dominance, control kind of system. If you look at his wife, she looks very similar to Prince William's wife as well. I mean, not exactly, but it's the same kind of thing. And, I discussed with Tracy Twyman on a show once this sort of idea that I have that, if Scotland ever did gain its independence, Andy Murray would end up king or president or prime minister. And basically, it seems like they have their independence, but he's part of that old guard system, And again, I don't know these things to be facts, but everything about the lives of some of these tennis players screams these things, and then with Roger Federer, as I said, and the other Swiss tennis player is Stan Wawrinka, which is a very interesting. Switzerland is time. The Large Hadron Collider there is trying to rip holes in the fabric of. They say they're looking for the God particle, but what they're really basically doing is ripping holes in the fabric of space and time to try and access other dimensions. So,
that's right.
Okay, so Federer is sort of timeless, doesn't seem to age, is sort of Peter Pan-like, takes time away from his opponent, has all of these sort of otherworldly kinds of qualities to him. Stan Wawrinka came out of kind of nowhere. He was always a guy who didn't live up to his, people thought his potential was. He was always in Federer's shadow. And then he's come out of nowhere, and every time he's made a major final in the last couple of years, he's won it. So he now has 3, which is as many as
So this is a new
Andy
guy,
Murray has.
New guy on the scene.
And if you think of it, if Federer represents time, Stan Wawrinka spelled Wawrinka, Wawrinka, it makes me think of a wrinkle in time. You know what I mean? Like he was a wrinkle for a little bit. But now it's fascinating stuff. You can do this all day. And you can, there's also one of the things that's always interesting, and this was what you started your and I communication about this topic, was if you look, there's a kind of Adidas tennis shoe called Barricade. And if you look at you can search on YouTube or look for the ads for these Barricades, and there is some crazy, it calls back to history, symbolism. For 1 year they named all of the barricades after different walls. So they had Great Wall of China, Wall Street, Berlin. It was very. There's trying to there's some either it's trying to signal something or it's echoing the energy that is out there metaphysically anyway.
Hey, so I have a question for you. What's going to happen at some point the Williams sisters, Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, they're going to have to retire at some point. Are they going to play until their 50s? What's going to happen when they retire? Because I'm a casual fan at best. When I was young, tennis was interesting. There was this explosion of all these players from all these countries. It was fascinating. But now it seems to have been distilled into about 6 people across both sexes. What happens when they go? What happens to tennis after that?
So it's very interesting. Like, I agree with you. Like, it's the only, I mean, in no other sport are we talking about the same people that we were 20 years ago, except for the exception of Michael Phelps in swimming. But that's a whole other show.
Right.
But so that's interesting. But, to me, think about it. Like, things have always been crazy, and we've been living under a system of domination and control for a long time, but nothing like it's been for the last 20 years, right? And so that's the same period of time that we have these particular sports stars dominating what I actually think is the most significant sport in terms of how it signals what's going on at the highest level of how this works, right? Like, not at the social control level, but at like the really deep metaphysical level and deep esoteric level. And so I wonder, I think all of them will be done sometime in the next 4 or 5 years. If they're not, then we really have something else to talk about in terms of what's going on with life extension technology or youth extension technology that is not being shared with everybody else. And I think there's already cause for some of that conversation. But it'll be really interesting. There are some new people coming up that are very exciting, but no one that is like these guys. So I don't know. It's the same question as what will happen if we overturn the kind of, and I don't mean a violent overthrow of government, but if we, through our consciousness and our awareness, are able to overturn this system of, the good people of the world being dominated by a few disgusting, alien pedophile, whatever you think they are, right? Narcissists, sociopaths who have been basically the parasites who have been eating and destroying reality, and we've just been sitting here trying to figure out what to do. If we can come to a point in our consciousness and our awareness and how we deal with things to reverse that, it would be really interesting if that's the way it happens in tennis. It's going to take quite an uprising of really spectacular new players to overturn this dynasty in tennis. But we're in the same situation the rest of the world, don't you say?
Yeah, I would say so. Kind of coming to the end of a certain line in a lot of ways. What I always thought was really fascinating about tennis, and not in really a good way though, was how the match between Bobby Riggs and Billie Jean King was set up. And and I really thought that Bobby Riggs threw that match because every place that I've looked into that, about who Bobby Riggs was, the clown prince of tennis and all that, but almost everybody says that even though Billie Jean King was a really good tennis player, Bobby Riggs, even at his age, was better than Billie Jean King. And, it was set up on ABC. It was a battle between the sexes. And it was really kind of this opening salvo of I think where we are now in terms of the relationships between the sexes and this kind of mediated assault on masculinity. And Bobby Riggs made a lot of money off of that match, and he kind of went away. He didn't do a whole lot after that match, but I always thought it was fascinating how that went down. And kind of, where we've been. I mean, obviously, there were programs in place prior to that. We had Gloria Steinem and her work with the CIA as promulgating feminism. But that was a really kind of big moment in time, and what I think went a long way towards manufacturing a piece of reality. Because I saw that when I was a kid. And I have to say, I felt bad that he lost. It was like, shit. He didn't beat her. And I don't know how that affected me. Maybe it didn't affect me at all. But you don't know about these things.
Yeah.
Maybe it did affect me. Maybe it affected other people. But clearly, it was a manufactured outcome. What are your thoughts on that event?
Yeah, so no, I've thought about that as well. From what I understand, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, I actually think that match she won was a rematch. There had been a first one where he won, or maybe she won twice. I don't know, but I think there was 2 matches. But yeah, no, I mean, the more I come to understand about how things work and about the CIA's sort of injection of a certain kind of feminism that have led us to this point we're at now, where there is this animosity and tension between the sexes, and where, I mean, everything about sex and gender right now is such a mess. And people are, it's not, it's not a healthy kind of, women having opportunity. It's turned into this sort of, thing where a lot of men are, I mean, I was talking with my dad the other day about like how many men I know whose wife have their balls in their purse. You know what I mean? Like just completely like men. Yeah. And I don't like the man hating. I don't like all of this, women's march kind of stuff. We're all human. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like this this constant agitation of the black against white and the man against woman and the gay and transgender against those who are, not. And I think Billie Jean King has actually, when you really look at it, she plays a part in that, and especially the way she agitates now. She was a very pro-Obama, and every time there's one of these, racial issues or gender issues, she's out there saying stuff. And not in a helpful way, like almost in like a Michael Moore kind of way, in my opinion. And I know some people aren't going to like that I say that, but my view, I was never like a huge fan of her, but I saw her as how they portrayed her, as like she was an important historical figure in the sport, and she made things happen for women, and that all may be true. But she's also, I think, done some harm to the relations between the sexes and the races, and there's no question about that. And
speaking of sex, I totally forgotten about this person, but if you want to go back into kind of this, this world of transgender and sex change, you got to talk about Renee Richards.
Yeah. No, Renee Richards. I mean, tennis was really the first sport where it was okay to be gay. You have Renee Richards, who is trans.
Yeah, that's right. You have Renee Richards.
You have Billie Jean King, who, really does blur some of that line between, she has a lot of that, she's become, it's weird. Like, she's sort of mannish, but she wears pearls. It's like very bizarre. It's kind of like that Janet Reno, Janet Napolitano kind of thing.
She does look like Napolitano a little bit. Yeah.
It is weird.
Totally
There's all these women who are totally like manly, but they wear pearls and like red lipstick, and it's like, what is going on here, dude? It's like psychologically disturbing.
Well, then you got Navratilova, right? Navratilova, she's a beast.
Navratilova, although she doesn't get involved in, so I mean, she's kind of more. She's been interviewed and she says some things sometimes, but she doesn't put herself as like the poster person for agitation of this kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
No. She's got her life and she does her thing. And
I see her as that she behaves in a noble, respectable manner all the time.
But she came out fairly early, right? I mean, everybody knew Navratilova was gay. Fairly
early, and she was accepted and loved. So, you know what I mean? So I don't know why all these people in tennis feel like they have to agitate. They've been accepted and loved their whole lives and careers. You also have Arthur Ashe, was one of the first famous people to have AIDS. Even though he wasn't gay, AIDS is considered, a gay.
Yeah, he got that through blood transfusion, didn't he?
He got that through. But you have there's that, and then there's Venus Gerulaitis also. Died from HIV. He was a famous tennis player, very well loved.
My first wife was friends with Venus Gerulaitis. She knew him.
Yeah. So
he had some very interesting habits.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a strange guy, but he was very popular in both the tennis world and the celebrity world.
He was a rock star.
Total rock star. And an entertaining player to watch. And, tennis has, I think, being gay and has been accepted in tennis for far longer than it's even been accepted in the general world.
Renee Richards was she was the original Caitlyn Jenner.
Absolutely. She also coached Martina Navratilova for a long time. You know that?
I did not know. So people don't know who Renee Richards was. It was Dr. Richard. I forget his last name. And he was a very good kind of amateur male tennis player, right?
Yep.
And he got a sex change, and he started competing on the women's circuit, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Fascinating. That's tennis for you right there.
That's tennis, and Caitlyn Jenner, and now, I mean, it is conceivable that we have men competing in women's tennis, and that might, I mean, it would be really interesting if the best female athlete of all time, who wasn't actually a female, but in this world we're living in, where nothing is as it seems, and things are inverted and perverse, it wouldn't surprise me at this point. And that isn't saying anything, bad about the individual who is Serena Williams, but she's just merely represents what is going on here.
Right. Yeah. Fascinating stuff, Emily. You guys have a show coming up this week?
So we have we put out a show about one a week. Our show is Off Planet Radio. You can go to offplanetradio.com. I do the show with my good friend and co-host Randy Moggins. I produce the show as well. Had a lot of interesting stuff lately. We have lots of good shows with Robert back there, and we're hoping Robert will come back sometime soon and break down some of the current goings-on with us. And thank you so much for having me here. I echo everything your previous guest said about you. I feel really honored to have you as a friend, and thank you so much for all the encouragement you've offered me as I've moved into this media space. You've been very supportive, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, hey, my pleasure. I think you're terrific, and looking forward to the next time you guys have me on, and give my best to Randy. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
That was Emily Moyer. Wasn't that fascinating, going down the fuzzy rabbit hole, the fuzzy ball rabbit hole of tennis? And she's just scratching the surface. I've had conversations with Emily where she really gets into this stuff in a very kind of, I'd love for her to do a book or a tennis blog where she could just, get this stuff out there. Well, I was going to run my interview with Darren Williams, but Emily and I went over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that interview on Monday. We're going to do an extended flame on Monday, and I'll get that interview up with Darren on Monday, and I'll do a little bit of a recap from the weekend. We hadn't stretched out and talked to people for a while, and I missed it. Sometimes, it gets, tired of hearing the sound of your own voice. It's always great to bounce ideas off of people, and we're doing, we're in the final days of Aquarius here. We got about 10 more days of Aquarius. So I thought, hey, let's have kind of an Aquarian moment in time and bring on Khayr, bring on Emily, and mix it up a little bit. So we got the eclipse on tonight. It is tonight, actually early tomorrow, about just after 12, midnight, between 12 and 1 a.m. That's when the eclipse is taking place. It is a penumbral eclipse, which means that it is kind of like a segmented eclipse, sort of the top and the bottom. It's not a full lunar eclipse. So if you stay up tonight, you'll be able to see part of it. We have the chemtrail-free sky. Wouldn't that be a nice thing to experience? So what do we expect from this eclipse? It's in Leo, so we're dealing with issues around children and love. And it's where have we eclipsed? Those areas in our lives. Because that's really what it's about. Where is the joy? Where is the love? Where is the child within? And I'm not talking about that new age child within that's kind of lurking around and skulking around. They're going to get, I'm so angry. I didn't get this and I didn't get that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about joy and being able to have a sense of joie de vivre with life. And it's very difficult these days to do that. You're outside, and there are a lot of unhappy people out there. We've got about half the country that's still pissed off and really that their candidate lost, and every single day now is a psychic assault and an emotional barricade against Trump and his cabinet. On the other side, you've got some people that are still kind of gloating and patting their chest and get with the party, but we're also starting to see sort of cracks in the Trump administration, especially as it relates to this whole notion around war and aggression, which we agreed that we were not going to be a part of. This was the tacit agreement that we have with the Donald. Now, we knew people that were switched on and turned on, they knew that he was running cover. Am I right? Because when it came down to talking about 9/11, he was just going in a different direction. He was talking about denouncing Saudis. And, if the Saudis were so invested in 9/11, then why did he leave the Saudis off the travel ban list? It's the inconsistencies and the incongruities of some of the decisions that Trump is making through Donald Trump that raises suspicion in the supporters or people that voted for him because he wasn't Hillary Clinton, gave us our best shot to stay out of war with Russia and unplug from the TPP. Those people themselves can even be considered a bit demoralized because of what's starting to take place. Well, the eclipse gives you the opportunity to find out where those areas in your life have been eclipsed. How do we let the light back in? Once the shadow of the moon disappears, how do we let that light back in? It's a conscious choice, conscious decision. Happiness is a choice, as they say. Well, I want to thank everybody for listening and being a part of the show. Of course, Khayr Carter, Coach Carter, Khayr Love, Emily Moyer, Off Planet Radio. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll be back on Monday. I think I'll probably do the live stream on Sunday, although I will be traveling. I'll do the live stream on Sunday. And Monday, of course, we have 15 minutes. And I'm going to play the Darren Williams interview in full. It's a great interview. I just was so fascinated by this tennis thing with Emily. I had to keep it going. All right. So through the impacted sinuses from here in Austin, Texas, you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step into what's possible. Remember that on this night of the eclipse. I'm Robert Phoenix. Have a great weekend.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Everybody needs to understand that I'm more than simply a hype man for this rap group, just like Geico is more than just a company that can save you money. Geico also has fast and friendly claim service, so they can help you when you need it most. And while I do love being a hype man, I also love reading for children's audiobooks. Like Little Bo Peep, she lost the sheep, and she don't know where to find them. Yo!
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.